When found yourself trapped in this maddening cycle, you're eating less than you ever have before. You're training harder than you thought possible. You're counting every single calorie that crosses your lips. Yet somehow, inexplicably, that stubborn belly fat clings to you like it's part of your DNA, while your energy slowly drains away until you can barely recognize yourself in the mirror. If you've ever stared at your reflection and whispered to yourself in frustration, "What am I doing wrong? Why isn't this working?" then what you're about to discover today may fundamentally transform not just how you approach fat loss, but how you understand your own body at the deepest biological level. When the fitness industry doesn't want you to know what your doctor probably never explained, and what changes everything once you finally understand it. Your body does not lose fat through simple mathematics. It loses fat through biology. And hidden within that biology, working silently beneath the surface of every meal you eat and every movement you make, there is one single hormone that acts as the master switch, determining in every moment whether you are actively burning fat or relentlessly storing it, completely independent of how many calories you're consuming. That hormone, that biological gatekeeper controlling your entire metabolic fate, is insulin. Look around you and you'll see millions of people trying desperately to lose fat by eating less, exercising more, and pushing their bodies harder than ever before. Yet the harder they push, the more exhausted they become. The more they restrict, the hungrier they feel. When stating your body's the wrong biological signals, day after day, meal after meal, creating a hormonal environment that makes fat loss nearly impossible, no matter how much willpower they summon. This isn't about starving yourself into submission. It's not about eliminating carbohydrates from your life forever. It's not about punishing yourself with extreme workouts until you collapse in exhaustion. When truly understanding why most fat loss efforts end in frustration and failure, we need to stop and examine a critical point, one that the entire fitness industry has fundamentally misunderstood for decades. It's the deeply ingrained belief that the human body works like a simple mathematical equation. Eat less than you burn, and fat will magically disappear. It sounds perfectly logical. It makes sense on paper. But here's the problem. That logic only works in theory. Biology does not run on mathematics. Biology runs on signals. Your body does not wake up each morning and ask itself, how many calories did this person consume yesterday? Instead, it asks a completely different question. Am I currently in storage mode or am I in usage mode? And the answer to that question, the answer that determines your entire metabolic fate, is determined almost entirely by one hormone, insulin. Imagine for a moment that your body contains two distinct fuel tanks. The first tank is glycogen, which is stored sugar tucked away in your liver and muscles. It's relatively small, quickly accessible, easy to use, like the cash you carry in your wallet for immediate purchases. The second tank is your body fat, a massive energy reserve designed specifically for long-term survival. This is your savings account. Now, here's what most people don't realize. Biologically speaking, your body's first priority is never to burn fat first. Its deepest evolutionary priority is actually to protect that fat, because fat ensures survival. Standing directly between these two fuel tanks, controlling access like a vigilant security guard, is insulin. Insulin is not simply a fat storage hormone. Insulin is an energy traffic controller, directing where energy goes and when it can be accessed. When insulin levels are low, the controller steps aside and energy can be freely withdrawn from your fat stores. When insulin is high, the controller returns immediately, locks the vault door tight, and essentially declares external fuel is coming in right now, so there's absolutely no need to access the reserves. Here's the detail that changes everything. When insulin is elevated, fat burning isn't just reduced or slowed down. It is biochemically blocked completely.
Insulin directly suppresses a process called lipolysis, which is the technical term for the release of fatty acids from your fat cells. In simpler terms, insulin doesn't just command your body to store energy, it physically locks the exit doors on your fat cells. This creates the paradox that traps millions of people. You can eat very little, you can suffer through hunger and deprivation, but if insulin remains chronically elevated throughout the day, fat burning is literally forbidden at the cellular level.
When stating more food and still lose fat steadily, if insulin stays low and stable most of the time. This is the explanation for why some people starve themselves without any visible results, while others seem to eat comfortably and lean out effortlessly. It has nothing to do with moral character. It has everything to do with hormonal signaling. When insulin remains chronically elevated, something strange and cruel happens. You enter a state of energy abundance combined with cellular starvation. Fat is plentiful but completely inaccessible to your cells. The brain, sensing this shortage at the cellular level, doesn't conclude that you have plenty of stored energy. Instead, it interprets the situation as an energy crisis and immediately triggers powerful hunger signals. You start craving food intensely, not because you're weak, but because your energy is literally locked away, and your brain is desperately trying to solve what it perceives as starvation. When stating obsessively on how much you eat is fundamentally insufficient. Two people can consume the exact same number of calories, yet their meal timing, their food sequence, and their underlying hormonal state will produce completely opposite outcomes. One person constantly spikes insulin through frequent grazing and eating carbohydrates first, keeping their fat stores locked away all day. The other person allows insulin to fall naturally between meals, and their fat stores unlock regularly, allowing steady fat loss without suffering. Fat loss is not a battle against food quantity. Fat loss is the skill of controlling a biological switch. One of the most confusing and emotionally devastating experiences for people genuinely trying to lose fat is this unbearable paradox. You are constantly, relentlessly hungry, yet at the same time, your body absolutely refuses to lean out. Sometimes you feel ravenously hungry, even immediately after finishing a meal. Society looks at this and labels it a lack of discipline, but the deeper biological truth is completely different. You are not overeating because you're weak. You are trapped in a hormonal loop. When insulin remains chronically elevated, the body enters a cruel biological paradox. On one hand, fat storage continues. On the other hand, your cells cannot access that stored energy. High insulin doesn't just signal storage, it actively prevents fat release, blocking the exit pathway. Imagine sitting directly on top of a vault containing millions of dollars, but the key is gone. Technically, you are wealthy. Practically, you are broke.
When stating insulin stays chronically high, energy is present in massive quantities, but it is completely unusable. The brain does not measure your fat stores visually. The brain measures cellular energy availability. When your cells cannot access fuel because insulin has locked the fat stores, the brain concludes we are dangerously low on available energy. This is an emergency. Ancient survival mechanisms activate immediately. Hunger signals intensify dramatically. Cravings become overwhelming. The brain begins pushing you specifically toward fast, easily convertible foods, especially sugar and starch. This is not a personal failure. This is an ancient survival response. The devastating problem is that in our modern environment of constant eating, this protective mechanism turns against you. High insulin blocks fat access. Your brain signals intense hunger. You eat more food. Insulin rises even further. Fat becomes even tightly locked.
The cycle repeats, tightening its grip. In this metabolic trap, you find yourself simultaneously eating regularly, starving at the cellular level, and gaining fat continuously. Traditional advice tells you to eat even less, But if the hunger you're experiencing is caused not by a lack of calories, but by a lack of energy access, then eating less only makes the problem worse. You don't need less fuel, you need access to the fuel you already have stored. This is where most weight loss strategies fail completely. They reduce food intake without addressing chronically elevated insulin. The result is real hunger, increased stress, cortisol activation, and even tighter fat storage. You don't get leaner, you just become more exhausted. The truth is remarkably simple. When insulin is low and stable throughout most of the day, hunger naturally quiets down on its own. There is no internal fight. There is no need for restraint. You simply aren't hungry.
When Steady Controlled guides you through an important fitness breakthrough. When insulin truly is the master switch determining whether you burn fat or store it, then the very first action you take at the beginning of a meal is the precise moment that flips that switch. And this is exactly where most people make the single biggest mistake without realizing it. They eat in the wrong order. Look carefully at how most meals are consumed. Bread arrives first. Rice, pasta, potatoes, or dessert are often consumed right at the start when the stomach is completely empty. At that precise moment, your digestive system is in peak absorption mode. When carbohydrates or sugar enter first into that empty stomach, the biological result is almost guaranteed. Blood glucose spikes rapidly and dramatically. This rapid rise is treated by your body as a legitimate threat because prolonged elevated glucose can damage tissues.
So your pancreas responds exactly as if it's handling a metabolic emergency, releasing a large, fast, aggressive surge of insulin to clear that sugar as quickly as possible. In that single moment, your entire body exits energy usage mode and switches directly into storage mode. The first consequence is that your fat stores become locked away instantly. The second consequence follows shortly after, a blood sugar crash. When insulin overshoots, your blood sugar doesn't just come down gently, it drops too low. Your brain interprets this as an energy crisis. Sleepiness washes over you, mental fog clouds your thinking, and most powerfully, intense sugar cravings emerge because your brain is desperately trying to restore glucose levels. And just like that, a familiar loop forms. Carbs first leads to insulin spike, which leads to fat storage, which leads to glucose crash, which leads to overwhelming cravings, which leads to more eating, which triggers another insulin spike.
This is the modern fat storage cycle, repeating itself daily while people believe they're simply eating normally. Here's the insight that transforms everything. You can eat exactly the same foods in exactly the same amounts, but simply eating them in a different order produces a completely different biological outcome. This doesn't require you to eliminate carbohydrates. It simply requires changing the sequence in which food enters your body. Biologically, food order determines the speed at which glucose enters your bloodstream, and speed is everything. Carbohydrates eaten first rush directly into your small intestine and get absorbed rapidly. But when fiber, protein, and healthy fat arrive first, digestion automatically slows down substantially. Glucose no longer floods your bloodstream. Instead, it enters gradually like a gentle stream, allowing your body to manage energy smoothly without triggering emergency insulin alarms.
The insulin trick starts with what we call the fiber firewall. This means that the very first thing to enter your digestive system should not be sugar or starch, but fiber-rich vegetables. Leafy greens, broccoli, spinach, asparagus, cabbage, cucumbers, the foods that are so often treated as optional side dishes actually play a critical biological role. The first thing you need to understand is that fiber is fundamentally not fuel. The human digestive system cannot break down fiber the way it breaks down sugar. Because fiber isn't rapidly digested, it does not trigger insulin release. When you eat fiber first, you're not signaling that energy is flooding in. You're saying, slow down. There's no emergency here.
As fiber enters your stomach and moves into your small intestine, it forms a gel-like structure, almost like a biological mesh that coats the intestinal lining. This mesh doesn't block nutrients. Instead, it slows their absorption rate significantly. This distinction is absolutely critical because insulin doesn't react primarily to how much carbohydrate you consume. Insulin reacts to how fast glucose appears in your bloodstream. The exact same amount of carbohydrate can be metabolically neutral if it enters your bloodstream slowly. But that same amount becomes metabolically disruptive if it floods in rapidly all at once. The fiber firewall is precisely how you flatten the glucose curve from the very first minutes of eating. Another powerful effect of eating fiber first involves its impact on your nervous system. When fiber physically stretches your gut, specialized receptors send a message up to your brain saying, "Food is arriving, but don't panic, there's no crisis." This naturally slows down your entire eating process without any conscious effort. Slower eating leads directly to slower, gentler insulin release. Many people believe that insulin control requires extreme restriction. The fiber firewall proves exactly the opposite. You don't need to drastically change what you eat. You only need to intelligently change how you begin eating. A simple side salad consumed before your main course can create a larger beneficial hormonal effect than cutting out hundreds of calories through deprivation. When you skip fiber entirely and begin a meal with bread, white rice, or pasta, you remove the protective barrier completely. Glucose rushes directly in. Insulin spikes aggressively. And your entire meal shifts dramatically into storage mode. The fiber firewall does far more than simply blunt insulin spikes. It also actively supports your gut bacteria. Fiber feeds beneficial bacteria. And when they're thriving, they lower your baseline inflammation. Lower inflammation directly improves insulin sensitivity. One small change at the start creates a powerful cascade effect. You don't need perfection. When steady fiber serves as the first protective layer, then protein plus healthy fat is the powerful stabilizing force that keeps your entire system from being swept away by insulin surges. Once fiber has set a slower rhythm, protein and healthy fats reinforce that rhythm. High-quality meat, fish, eggs, full-fat dairy, avocado, olive oil, these are not merely calories. They are biological signals communicating to your body that energy is arriving steadily. Physiologically, protein consumption stimulates the release of an incredibly important hormone called GLP-1. This hormone plays an absolutely crucial role in sustainable fat loss. First, GLP-1 significantly slows gastric emptying, which means food stays in your stomach longer instead of rushing into your small intestine. Slower digestion means glucose enters your bloodstream gradually, preventing sharp insulin spikes. Second, GLP-1 sends powerful satiety signals directly to your brain. This is not uncomfortable fullness. This is a calm sense of satisfaction. The mental debate about whether to eat more simply disappears because your brain genuinely recognizes that stable energy processing is happening. Third, GLP-1 actually reduces the total amount of insulin your body requires to handle a meal effectively. This is particularly important for insulin-resistant individuals. Instead of your body shouting with massive amounts of insulin, it can communicate more effectively with less. Lower insulin means dramatically less fat storage pressure. Popular weight loss drugs work by mimicking this exact GLP-1 signal. What's overlooked is that GLP-1 can be activated naturally through proper protein intake and correct meal sequencing without any pharmaceutical intervention.
When steady fats play an equally important complementary role, they substantially increase satiety, they extend digestion time, and they help stabilize post-meal blood sugar. When protein is strategically paired with healthy fat, the combined slowing effect becomes significantly stronger. Many people still fear dietary fat, assuming eating fat causes fat gain. But in the context of insulin control, the opposite is true. Fat does not spike insulin at all. And when healthy fat is consumed at the right time, it actively helps prevent excessive insulin release. With the protein plus fat anchor firmly in place, common post-meal problems begin to fade naturally. No energy crashes, no lingering hunger, no random snacking hours later. These improvements don't happen because you've developed discipline. They happen because your brain has finally received accurate metabolic information. You don't need excessive amounts of protein.
When steadily, controlled guiding someone through an important fitness breakthrough. Adequate protein, enough to meaningfully activate GLP-1 and signal biological safety. When your body genuinely feels safe, it doesn't desperately cling to stored fat. And when that storage pressure finally lifts, fat is finally allowed to leave. After carefully building the fiber firewall and strategically placing protein and fat, carbohydrates finally make their appearance. This is perhaps the most surprising part, because unlike extreme diets, this approach does not require you to eliminate carbohydrates. It simply asks you to place them in their proper biological position. When carbs are eaten last, the internal environment is completely different. Your stomach is no longer empty. Your intestine is coated with protective fiber. Gastric emptying has slowed significantly. In this context, carbohydrates no longer hit your bloodstream like a flood. Instead, they arrive as a controlled, steady stream. Insulin doesn't react to the simple presence of glucose.